A secret heir to the English throne, born in scandal, hidden by royal servants, and discovered in the court of Spain. Sounds like something out of a Tudor historical novel. But in 1587, a young man appeared claiming to be Arthur Dudley, the illegitimate son of Queen Elizabeth I and Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester. Was he really the Queen's hidden child, or a clever impostor, perhaps even a spy? I'm historian and author Claire Ridgway, and today we're uncovering the incredible story of Arthur Dudley, heir to the throne or impostor. It all began in the summer of 1587, when a Spanish ship intercepted a small boat off the coast of San Sebastián. Among the passengers was a man in his 20s who introduced himself as a Catholic pilgrim returning from Montserrat. Spanish officials, suspicious that he might be an English spy, arrested him and threw him into prison. When questioned, the man insisted on speaking with Sir Francis Englefield, a Catholic exile who'd once advised Queen Mary I. And that's when the story took a dramatic turn. The young man said his name was Arthur Dudley. He claimed that he'd been raised by a man named Robert Southern, once a servant of Cat Ashley, Elizabeth I's governess and trusted friend. Southern, he said, had lived in a village about 60 miles from London, and on his deathbed he confessed that Arthur was not his real son, but refused to tell him any more. Arthur had stormed off, but a local schoolmaster named Smith, sent after the distraught young man by Southern, revealed the truth. Arthur was, he said, the child of Queen Elizabeth I and Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester. According to this tale, Southern had been summoned to Hampton Court Palace years earlier, handed a baby, and told to name him Arthur and raise him as his own. A baby said to belong to one of the Queen's ladies. However, when a teenage Arthur ran away to sea and was stopped by a letter from Elizabeth I's privy councillors and ordered back to London with John Ashley, Cat Ashley's husband, it became apparent that he was someone important. His true parentage was far grander. Arthur's account continued with remarkable detail. When he was older, he said, he'd been brought before Robert Dudley himself by officers named Blunt and Flood, both real men. Leicester, Arthur claimed, had greeted him with affection, by tears, words, and other demonstrations, before warning him, "You are like a ship under full sail, pretty to look upon, but dangerous to deal with." Leicester, so Arthur said, then ordered him taken out of the country under Sir Francis Walsingham's supervision. But fearing for his life, Arthur had escaped from Walsingham, travelling across Europe, all the time terrified that he'd be tracked down and murdered by Elizabeth's agents to hush him up. And then he was captured by the Spanish. Englefield listened to Arthur's rather tall story and even tested him. He quizzed Arthur on his education, his knowledge of the Queen's court, and the details of places he claimed to have visited. To Englefield's astonishment, Arthur answered correctly. Yet something didn't add up. Englefield suspected espionage. He wrote to King Philip II of Spain, warning, "I am of the opinion that he should not be allowed to get away, but should be kept very secure." Arthur, it seems, was sent to the castle of Lameda, and Englefield continued to report that he might be a tool of Elizabeth's council, perhaps sent deliberately to Spain as bait, or to gather intelligence on the eve of war. We know from surviving documents that Arthur Dudley truly existed. A letter to William Cecil in May 1588 mentions that King Philip was paying £6 a day to keep Arthur Dudley imprisoned. By 1590, there was still mention of a man claiming to be Leicester's son in captivity. And then silence. Arthur vanishes from history. So who was he? Some historians like Martin Hume have suggested that Arthur was indeed a spy, perhaps on a secret mission, who invented his story when captured. Others, like Paul Doherty, have entertained the idea that he might have been exactly who he said he was, the Queen's hidden child. Could his story be true? Well, let's look at the evidence. If Arthur was 27 in 1588, that would place his birth around 1561, a year when Elizabeth's movements are less well documented. Contemporary reports said that she appeared dropsical and swelling extraordinarily, and some even claimed that she seemed to have come from her childbed. It's intriguing, especially when we recall that this was just months after the death of Amy Robsart, Robert Dudley's wife, a time when any suggestion of intimacy between Elizabeth and Dudley would have been scandalous. The name Arthur itself existed in both the Tudor and Dudley family trees. Perhaps symbolic, perhaps coincidence. And when Elizabeth fell gravely ill in 1562, she wanted Dudley named Lord Protector, a move some have taken as emotional as well as political. Could all of this point to a hidden pregnancy? In a word, no. I find it almost impossible to believe that Elizabeth I could have carried and given birth to a child in secret. She was surrounded every moment by ladies, courtiers, doctors, and spies. Any change in her appearance would have been noticed, discussed, and likely reported to ambassadors desperate for gossip. As historian Sarah Gristwood puts it, do we really believe that someone as closely watched, as incessantly accompanied as Elizabeth, could have carried a pregnancy to term and given birth with no one knowing? Even Anne Vavasour, one of her ladies, couldn't conceal her pregnancy for long, and she wasn't the Queen of England. So who was Arthur Dudley? Well, we can only speculate. He may have been an English agent sent abroad by Walsingham and forced to improvise when captured. Or perhaps he was simply an opportunist, clever, educated, and brave enough to weave himself into the greatest royal mystery of the age. Whatever the truth, Arthur's story tells us a great deal about Elizabeth's image, the rumours that surrounded her, and our enduring fascination with the idea that the Virgin Queen might not have been so virginal after all. As for me, I agree with Sarah Gristwood. Elizabeth was who she said she was, the Virgin Queen married to her kingdom, a woman who made a choice and kept to it, despite all the rumours that still swirl centuries later. What do you think? Was Arthur Dudley the Queen's lost heir, or just another clever Tudor pretender? If you enjoyed this deep dive into Tudor mystery and myth, please like, subscribe, and ring that bell for more tall tales and Tudor stories. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.